For more on this story, we're now joined in studio by Executive Director of Corruption Watch, David Lewis. Thank you very much for joining us, David.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Now, before we get into the shortlisted candidates, briefly explain what the role of Corruption Watch was in terms of the whole process of appointing the next public protector.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have no formal role, but we have a large role, because our mission is to encourage the public to get involved in issues surrounding corruption. And the appointment of the next public protector is a very important such issue. Our life would have been very different had it not been for the current public protector. So we're keen that the next public protector should have some of those qualities.
Now, you conducted background checks on all the nominated candidates. Take us through those findings, because as I read in the intro now, you were saying that some of them have a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah, I don't remember saying that, but anyway.
But take us through the findings.
You know, we did actually quite a high-level check. There were 63 or 61 candidates who were nominated, who we had to look through. So we did this in 7 or 8 days. So it was quite a high-level check, mostly drawn from their CVs and then from stuff that was in the public domain, particularly in the media. And we looked at outstanding aspects of their private conduct and outstanding aspects of their personal conduct. And I don't doubt that there will be some questions to answer. The people who are ultimately shortlisted, of whom there are 14, we will do a much more detailed check on. Of those 14, some are people whom there is nothing in the public domain about. Others have been public figures, and there is a lot about them. Some of them have taken large golden handshakes from the SABC. Others have had problems in relation to their personal conduct.
This is extremely controversial.
There are a lot that we don't know anything about. So I would prefer not to say anything about individuals until we have done a much deeper background check on everybody, which is what we're going to be starting to do now.
Like I've just said now, and even in your statement, it's really quite controversial at a certain level. How do you balance it out? Because you did say you only had about 7 or 8 days to do the checks, for example. So how do you balance what is in the media, which is not always accurate or factual, to what is actually the reality and what they are going to come across as, especially when it comes to the interviews?
You know, I mean, I suppose it sometimes happens that even intensive coverage in the media is not factually accurate. But when you see a story appearing many, many times and there are certain admissions and acknowledgements made, you can rely on it pretty much. But not everybody's private life and work life is spelt out in the media. And so we did, you know, what I think is a pretty thorough check, with the limitations of having to rely, as I say, on public statements. There are people there who have been judges or magistrates. We'll look at their record on the bench. We will look at things that they're not anymore in the shortlist, but there were parliamentarians who said certain things about the public protector and the role of the public protector. So it's not it's not exactly a sort of digging in the dustbins kind of exercise that we're doing. It's about material that was consistently in the media about them, but it also goes beyond that. I mean, we, as I say, look at detailed aspects, particularly of their work life.
Now, you mentioned there were over 60 nominees, and the list has gone down to 14.
Yeah.
Are you happy with the 14 candidates?
Look, I think it's a very diverse group of candidates, which I'm happy with. You know, I think, I wonder 7 years ago whether anybody would have thought Thuli Madonsela would have become the kind of public protector she became. She was probably a reasonably unknown entity at that time. So I think there are diverse genders, there are diverse races, there are diverse people with diverse backgrounds, there are even quite diverse ages, which is nice to see. So I think there's a good mix there and probably a difficult decision to make for the committee.
Are there any candidates, or maybe without even saying names, that you feel shouldn't have even made it to the list, or some that didn't make it on the list, part of that 60-something that aren't on the list?
Well, inevitably, but I don't want to be influenced by that, because, as I say, even in the 14, but certainly in the 61, there were a lot of people who I'd never heard of, and this doesn't mean that they would not make fine public protectors by any stretch of the imagination. There were some people who I had heard of. Had I been on the committee, I might not have voted onto the list, and there were some people who didn't get onto the list who I might have voted onto the list. But, in the end, this is quite a difficult subjective choice, and I respect the decision that the committee made. And as I say, the list is suitably diverse for this to be an interesting decision.
Let's look at the 14 candidates now. How much time do you have to go into, the next investigations and, looking at them specifically?
As I recall, the committee have set down the 11th of August, and it will almost certainly have to run into more days than one. It will definitely have to run into more days than one. Set the 11th of August to have the interviews.
Yes.
And so I would think we would try and get out the detailed vetting exercise within the next 10 days. Of course, the committee itself and the state security agencies, I'm sure themselves, do a certain amount of vetting, but ours is, I think, somewhat more broad-ranging.
Now, the public had until last Friday to lodge objections to the candidates. Does it end here for the public, or do they still have an opportunity to lodge complaints based on the 14?
Well, I think that formally it ends for the public, but it won't end for the public. I mean, we will continue in our vetting exercise taking input from the public, either their impressions of the candidates' CVs or something that they may know about the candidates that we don't know about them. And then when the committee decides on who its candidate is going to be, and they put forward that to the National Assembly, we are going to put up a voting app that will be available on smartphones and feature phones and whatever, that will allow the public to vote and say whether they like this candidate or they don't.
And that's actually what I wanted to look at next, this app. How exactly does the app work? So do you have the list of candidates and people just click on the person? Yes. And it's actually interesting why you decided to choose an app, looking at innovation and looking at ways to interact with the public beyond just workshops and public hearings.
Yeah. Well, it's been a bit of a hallmark of the work that we do, is to do that kind of thing and to use new communications technologies and to try and make them as accessible as possible. So it's very important for us that the app is accessible on feature phones and not only on smartphones. So, and a large number of people can have access to it. We've done a lot of work with video material, with YouTube, and we find it a very effective way of mobilizing people. So we think that the app will be quite far-reaching. I mean, how it exactly works, I'm not sure. You're sort of asking the wrong age demographic in Corruption Watch. But it will work in a manner that allows people to choose. I mean, remember, by the time it gets to the National Assembly, there's one person. Yeah. And so they really are not selecting between 14 different people, although the interviews, the committee has agreed with us, will be televised. So people will have a chance to look at the interviews. And I guess when the one person goes there, they will think, I really don't like this guy. In fact, I wanted somebody else to be on it, whom I saw being interviewed, and so I will vote no. And let's see how that works out. But, I think that whoever it is, it will be a better public protector for the scrutiny that they've been put through in this round. And I think they will know that they're being scrutinized the minute they step into that office.
It is quite extensive. Now, here's something that we definitely can't run away from because it keeps coming up. Candidates with political affiliations. What's your take on it? Does it compromise their independence? And which is obviously very critical for the role. It's an independent role.
Interesting question. I mean, it was actually debated between the committee members to some extent. I don't think it excludes people from becoming the public protector. I mean, it didn't exclude great judges like Zakia Quirb and Albie Sachs, who were all activists, ANC activists, and who became completely independent Constitutional Court judges. It doesn't exclude them, but it makes their burden to establish that they are actually independent, quite a lot larger, quite a lot heavier. And so, as it so happens, none of the people who occupied offices in political parties did get through to the next round. So the question doesn't really arise. But I was interested to see, I think the committee more or less took that position, that it didn't disqualify them, but that there would be an added burden on them to establish that they were independent.
Now, let's look at the views of the current public protector regarding, who should become the next public protector. I remember initially when she had announced, that she's coming to the end of her term, she had sort of endorsed her deputy. Yeah. Does it really matter who she endorses? Or
I'm not sure that she did that. I think she's been very scrupulously independent, as I think she probably has to be.
I think she said, he's learnt a lot from her. He's done a good job, and he would be fitting. Yeah,
no doubt.
That's
I mean,
more accurate.
no doubt. He's all of those things are accurate, but it would be unusual for her to. She would, I'm sure, be accused of ruling beyond the grave if she did that. There were a lot of people on social media, on our social media, who firstly wanted her to stand again, and when they discovered that was impossible, wanted her to just nominate who her successor should be. So I think, her deputy is in fact one of the 14 shortlisted candidates and will be interviewed. And I don't doubt the fact that he has been in that position for such a long time will hold him in good stead. There are some things in his background of being the public protector will undoubtedly be the deputy public protector that he will undoubtedly have to answer for, as all people in public life have to. Nobody gets through a long period of controversial public life without having to answer for some decisions that they've made, and that's true of every one of those people, and it's true of Kevin Malunga as well. But his experience will mostly, I'm sure, count in his favour.
I mean, as Corruption Watch, you mentioned earlier that it's really important for you to get the public involved in this process. How are you finding the public in terms of participating in this process? Are they enthusiastic about it? Do they want to learn more about it? Are they interested?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a huge response from the public and from the media. And the media have their public as well, to put it mildly. So we've had a huge response to this, and it's been very gratifying. And I think that it's going to be a bit of a role model for how other positions such as this should be filled. Judges, they all have some degree of public participation, but we need to have a debate about the best way of doing it. Is judges, the NPA, the head of the IEC, the head of the Auditor General, maybe the CEO of the SABC, who knows? I mean, all of these are jobs that carry huge public responsibility. And I think it's fitting that the public, not necessarily vote for who they want, but that they get involved in the process. Yeah.
Now, you're on the inside. At the end of this, do you see most of the people being happy with whomever is going to be chosen, or is it more of a wait-and-see game?
Yeah, well, there's a certain sort of political dimension to this. Everybody is always critical of. They're almost more critical of people who they feel they had a certain responsibility in electing, because they feel that they own them, and we want the public to feel that they own the public protector, warts and all. And so I think this is somebody who takes this job must have a sort of strong spine and a strong stomach, and be willing to deal with a demanding public and active citizenry. And I hope that that's what we've helped generate in this process. Citizens who will seriously see this public protector as their protector and demand the level of protection that they deserve.
I think a good way to wrap up would be to just go back once again to the role of Corruption Watch. I mean, you mentioned earlier that the role isn't particularly formal in this instance, but it is a large one. So with all the vetting and with all the interactions that you're having with the public, are you going to put it in some sort of report and then give it to the committee? How exactly is that process going to work?
I mean, as we did in this first round, we presented the committee with a 150-page dossier summarizing the backgrounds of the 61 people, and I don't doubt that this time we'll do the same. I mean, last time round we were officially the public were officially invited to do this, but the chair of the committee has handled this in a very open and transparent manner and emphasized on a number of occasions how much she wants public participation. So I construe this as an invitation to us to do the same again, and I'm sure they'll accept it gratefully. They have a difficult job to do, and we're not going to come to this with any big agenda. We will present what we know to be the truth. I don't think that we're going to editorialize about it, that we're going to say this fact should exclude that one or this fact should favour that one. We're going to let the committee look at it and the public look at it and make up their own minds.
David, this has certainly been an insightful discussion. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
That was Executive Director of Corruption Watch, David Lewis, joining us live to talk about those 14 candidates that have been shortlisted for the Public Protector job. We'll have more news for you after the break. Stay with us.